Hello, welcome. So glad that everyone could join us today. We're going to get going. This is Chats from Home with Aeon. My name is Virginia Brown, and I'm the Vice President of Advancement here at Aeon. First off, we'd love to know who else is in the room joining us today. Please say hello by typing in the chat window. Make sure you select a chat, all panelists and attendees, or everyone if that's an option, and tell us your name and how you're connected to Aeon. I'm very grateful to see Michelle's here, Alice is here, Steve is here, and Christine. Be lovely to see other folks say hello in the chat so we know who's here. Before we jump into the conversation today, where we're going to be focusing on Alan, as most of you know, I want to start by thanking some of our generous sponsors of the Chat from Home series. Our gold sponsor today is Weiss Builders. Our bronze sponsors are Great Southern Bank, Pella, Thrivent, and Two Harbors. We're so grateful for their support to make homes affordable in the Twin Cities and for all of us to be together today. But let's get into the main event and the reason that we're all here. First, I'd like to welcome Tom Hoch. Tom is the former Deputy Director for Minneapolis Public Housing Authority and former President and CEO of Hennepin Theater Trust. He also happened to serve on Aeon's board of directors and was integral in helping select Alan to lead Aeon a mere 33 years ago. Tom's going to be moderating the discussion today in an interview style conversation with Alan. So welcome, Tom. And then of course we have Alan. Alan Arthur, as I'm sure most of you know, is Aeon's president and CEO. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Tom and Alan to have the conversation. Tom and Alan, can you join us?
We
Wonderful.
Sure can.
And I'm going to step away and leave it to you fellas.
Okay, thank you so much, Virginia, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I am so honored to be here to moderate this conversation with my friend Alan Arthur. So let me give you just a little bit of the logistics. Here's how this is going to work. I've received a list of questions that you all have submitted in advance, and after I feed your questions to Alan from the from that list, we'll continue to answer questions that you have up until we run out of time. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, please put it in the Q&A and we will do our best to get to it. I hope we can answer all of them, but if we can't, someone from Aeon will be happy to follow up with you. So I hope that's clear, and let's go ahead and dive right in because we've got Alan right here and we don't want to waste any time. Alan, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well, Tom. I'm doing very well. Thank you very much.
Good.
How are you?
Good. I'm great, and I'm so excited to be here and so excited for you in your next chapter, whatever that is. So I'm going to jump into the questions we've gotten, and I have them right here. As we go back to 1988, that was the year you started. Tell us what your first year at Aeon was like.
Well, first of all, Tom, as I always remind you, I was the second choice of the search team. And I don't know who the first choice was, and you can't remember that part of it. So, but I was, I think, the cheaper choice from the search team at what was then called Central Community Housing Trust of Minneapolis, formerly. Well, the first thing I remember is I stepped in on October, so we had to start working on the 1989 budgets. And the very first budget I remember was $135,000. This is speed forward to today, and our total budgets, central operations and properties together, are $80 million. So a little change from back then. When I stepped in the door, we had 2.5 staff, 1.5 permanent staff, of which I was one, and a full-time temporary staff person who I'm so happy actually became a permanent staff person shortly thereafter, Cecile Bedore. She's been such a leader in the community. So I inherited a really good board of directors, which included you, Tom, and some really good staff as well, even though it was only 1.5 beyond me. So
flattery will get you everywhere. So thank you. Here's a question from Paula. What are you most proud of during your time as Aeon's president and CEO?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, a lot of folks think I'm going to cite a project or a development project or a building, but actually I'm most proud that I worked with the early board of directors and every single board of directors since then on really high quality policy governance. We have in place a comprehensive, disciplined form of governance. And unfortunately, most organizations, I think, are boards of directors, really good people who care about the purpose sitting around and talking about stuff, but what they're talking about is the stuff of the day. It's not as disciplined and comprehensive as we've made it at Aeon. So I think that has been a really strong foundation for our ability to be successful, and I'm very, very proud of being a part of that.
Okay. And what is the biggest challenge you've faced throughout your career?
There are so many challenges, really. I don't know there is a biggest challenge, really. It's, I think probably always the biggest challenge for each of us is ourselves, pushing ourselves to think bigger, think how we can make an impact, a better impact. I often joke that we'd be doing twice what we're doing today if our executive director, our CEO, had been smarter in the first 15 or 20 years that he was here. But that's not how life works, is it? We learn along the way. And so I think we certainly have ongoing challenges about money and capital and people and bureaucracies, et cetera. But I don't know that there has been a biggest challenge, to be honest with you.
Okay. Martha wants to know if there are any Aeon properties that you consider your baby, the ones that maybe best exemplify the work of Aeon.
My favorite property is actually the Balmoral, which is probably one of our properties that is worn around the edges more than any other property we own. But it's unique in its style. If you walk into it, you think you're in Europe or New Orleans. We have some iconic projects that certainly come to mind. East Village was the first mixed-income, mixed-use major development of its kind in the state of Minnesota, and we did it. A little nonprofit did it back in 1999, 2000. And then, of course, our extremely green and materials healthy project at the corner of Franklin and Portland, in partnership with Hope Community, is an iconic project for the organization. It certainly is embedded in my brain.
You touched on the importance of good board governance, to the strength of the organization, and that's certainly a lesson you have obviously learned, the importance of that. What other lessons have you learned in your years with Aeon?
I think probably the most important lesson I was reinforced really is the ability to remember the Serenity Prayer and repeat it regularly. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage, and this is the important part, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think, you have to be able to sleep at night so you can get up the next morning, go back to work and do what you're supposed to do. So I think that's the most important lesson.
That's really good, really, really a good message for all of us as well. Here's a question, and well, I'll just ask it and you can respond however you want. What is the biggest mistake you think you made as Aeon's leader?
And Tom, you probably don't remember this, but in the early days of Aeon, we were keeping track of what were called Allen's Follies. So there was Allen's Folly 1, and then there was Allen's Folly 2, and then there was Allen's Folly 3, and I think after that we quit keeping track of them. I often say that I make about one good mistake an hour, and so if I work an 8-hour day, I make 8. If I work a 12-hour day, it's 12. You may remember Allen's Folly 1, Tom. We had Bury Manor, it had just gone up. We hadn't known it for too long, and a building burned down next to it, and I thought we should buy that building and add some units to Bury Manor. It didn't happen, and so we wasted $80,000, and it became a community garden, which was not a terrible end to it, but it didn't become additional housing. So that was called Allen's Folly 1, and that was $80,000 when we didn't have a lot of money in our bank account.
Yeah, in a $135,000 budget.
Exactly.
Right. As you look at where the organization is now, what do you think the organization should be looking for in the next CEO of Aeon?
Well, of course, that's the board of directors' job, not mine. I certainly talked to them about it, but they and I, and probably you all, really know that the most important ingredient is passion for doing the work, commitment to what we are trying to achieve, commitment to making home possible for people. The other thing that certainly I've talked with the executive committee and the search team about, and again, they know this because they're really smart people. Sometimes, I read the newspaper about a new CEO coming to an organization, whether it's a for-profit or nonprofit, and they say, my vision for the organization is blank. And when I read that, it makes me retch, because the vision for an organization is not about a single individual. It's about collective. It's about a group of people working together collaboratively. And so I think a sense of collaboration, the ability to listen, push, certainly push, but listen and work with others is a key ingredient for any really good CEO.
You know, we had a question about what advice you'd give to the next Aeon leader, but I think you actually answered the question just now in terms of what you were saying. Can you tell us one or two stories about Aeon residents that you encountered that really made an impression on you?
There are two that come to my mind immediately. One is Eddie. Eddie just died of COVID at age 54 this last year ago. Eddie was a tremendous marketing person, resident and marketing person. When he came to us, he'd been homeless for quite a while. And he told me once that this was the first time that he felt like he was part of something bigger than just himself. So he felt really connected to our mission. He showed it. He became a board member and was a board member, passionate, vocal board member for 9 years. Eddie was called the mayor of Stevens Square. He lived in our Coyle property down there. And wherever he went, he talked about Aeon and the importance of home. And he even volunteered at some of the shelters and tried to get homeless folks connected to us and our work and home at Aeon. So Eddie was a tremendous leader and resident for us at Aeon, and friend, really. I miss Eddie. The other tremendous story is Artiste, and Artiste still lives in one of our properties. But Artiste spent most of her young life in and out of jail, and I was so proud to go to her graduation at MCTC, where she was the keynote speaker. Unbelievably passionate, community-minded person in our community, and it produced tears all around with the speech that she gave as the keynote speaker for our graduating class at MCTC.
How has, here's just a question of mine, you know, you touched on one of the impacts of COVID on one resident. How have you navigated the whole pandemic situation, you know, with the work that you do?
Yeah, first of all, we even reassigned some of our staff to be focused on working with our residents to get some of the rental assistance, emergency rental assistance that's been available through counties, cities, different cities, and of course the state and federal governments. It's been a hard process. Sometimes it's taken 2, even 3 hours to get through the paperwork and the process that's necessary. But it's very, very important to try to keep our residents housed. In a lot of organizations and situations, residents have self-evicted. They get so far behind and it gets so depressing, especially in the early days of COVID, they kind of self-evicted. So we've worked real hard to try to keep our residents from self-evicting and making sure they had a place to stay. So COVID it really hit our residents hard. It still is hitting them from a mental health standpoint. Clearly, it's had an impact there. And so we've been working to try to figure out how we connect our residents to more mental health services as we continue to wade through this problem.
Okay. Janet wants to know, you know, with rents increasing, you know, what do you see as the future of affordable housing, or maybe the landscape of affordable housing, and where do you see Aeon fitting within that?
Well, our strategic planning that we're doing and just finishing up right now, as a matter of fact, when I leave this meeting, we'll be headed into a leadership team meeting about our strategic future. But what we're saying is we're going to double down on our work. And that, of course, means we need to have all of our partners, whether it's the local partners, the county partners, state partners, and federal partners, to double down with us. Our job is to be the tool to make affordable housing happen and be sustained. But our partners have to come to the table. They're the ones who really make affordable housing happen. They use us for that purpose. And so I'm hopeful that we've been predicting that homelessness is going to double and maybe even triple. I think that's almost a given. You can see it happening now with the tent cities that are going on out there. And our job is to make ourselves as best as we can be so that we can be the best tool for the community and others it is still discouraging to me that I looked at our three of our major the websites of three of our major Congress people, and none of them mention affordable housing as their priorities. So we still have some work to do to make sure people understand how important home is in people's lives, and that the community at large, including our policymakers and government agencies, are going to have to work hard to double down as well.
Thank you. You recently had a farewell event that I was at. It was really lovely at one of your developments. And then we have today's conversation. But I understand that you're not leaving immediately, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the board of directors is in a search. They've hired a search firm to help. It's about halfway through the search. They still have a lot of interviews. So they have gotten some, really good candidates. I think I've been told. I'm not part of the search process directly, and they'll do their work of interviewing and checking references and then making decisions. That probably won't happen for a couple months. It won't end, at least for a couple months, I would say, reasonably. So sometime by the end of the year is the likely time that I will officially walk out the door, and I will help pass the baton as smooth as possible to the new CEO when that transition happens.
So maybe you haven't taken a breath yet to think much about this, but maybe you can take a guess. What do you think you're going to do next?
I do not know. Although I have thought about it, I haven't spent much time thinking about it. I sometimes say I'm going to teach second grade. That might be what I do. But I'm going to do something. I'm not the kind of person that likes sitting around on the beach for more than 5 minutes. So I'm going to figure out something. I'm sure it'll get figured out. I was watching a movie with my granddaughter, and she pointed out that Winnie the Pooh says, I figure out where I'm going by leaving where I have been. And so I've been kind of channeling Winnie the Pooh.
Do you see any role for you in the future in the affordable housing arena?
Oh yeah, quite possibly. Yeah, absolutely. It's what I know. Obviously, actually, in the housing arena in general is what I know. I've been, I'm a carpenter by trade. I started that when I was 19. So I've been in the construction, real estate, lending, code enforcement, development arena all my life, really, or most of my life. And so, I would say it's likely that I'll fall somewhere in that arena.
Okay. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had a carpenter background. Great.
Yep.
Now I know who to call when I don't know what it is I'm doing. Okay. And, if you, as you're kind of stepping out the door later this year, is there anything particular that you're looking forward to?
People say, are you going to travel now? Well, I love traveling. My wife and Carol love to travel. And so I'd say we'll continue to travel, but you can't travel. I think some people do. I can't travel 12 months of the year. So I'll be doing something. We certainly have some ideas for where I'd love to go to Machu Picchu, for example. But I would do that even though I continue working. So we're going to travel, but that's not the main thing I'll be doing.
Okay. So what do you think you'll miss most about Aeon?
That's easy. That's really easy with the people. I feel really fortunate, lucky, or as my friend Pastor Agnew says, blessed to walk into work every day and be surrounded by people who care about other people. To go to donor events and be surrounded by people who care about other people. To meet with policymakers and leaders in the community who care about other people. Not everybody in the world gets to go to work in the morning and have that be the case. And so that's what I'll miss the most, the people. The great thing about the party the other day was I got to see really great people who I haven't seen for, a couple of years now because of COVID. And so that's what I'll miss the most.
Okay. Joan has a question for you. And she says in 4 words, I don't know if you can do it in 4 words, but take a stab at it. What will your legacy be?
4 words. I don't think really truthfully, Joan, I don't think in terms of legacy. I think do it better, seek to do it better. That might be 5 words, but seek to do it better. That is 5 words. Sorry, Joan. Always seek to do it better.
Okay. That'd be a fine legacy. Okay. Here's a question from Frank. How long do you think it will take to eliminate homelessness?
Depends on how we categorize homelessness. You know, I grew up when the only homelessness was people, usually older men riding, middle-aged to older men riding the rails. You have people tell me sometimes homelessness will always be with us. And I say, no, it hasn't always been with us like we have it today. We didn't have homeless families and children when I was growing up, but we do today.
Mm-hmm.
So if we didn't have that at one time, we don't have to have it again. How long will it take? It would take us, if we started in earnest today, we could figure it out in 15 years probably. But we better start today. So that there's still going to be a handful of people who are riding the rails or something akin to riding the rails. But we don't have to have homeless families and children, and we shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Well, I certainly agree with that. Here's a question from Elizabeth. What policy change, which is interesting, what policy change would make the biggest difference in increasing the amount of affordable housing in the Twin Cities?
Yeah, so we are pushing actually a proposal at the state legislature, which I think is the most important and most potentially impactful policy change. That needs to be made at both the federal and state level, and that is to increase the amount of Section 8 subsidies that we make available to families and individuals in our country. The majority of the problem has been caused by the fact that the country has backed away from Section 8 starting in 1985. We still have basically the same amount of Section 8 subsidies, housing assistance now that we had in 1985. And we've grown as a country from 240 million people to 325 million people. So, and if we insist on paying people still minimum wage, we still pay 17% of the folks in the state of Minnesota are paid minimum wage. We're talking about $10.50, $11 an hour. Mm-hmm. If we continue to not pay people enough to be able to afford housing in the marketplace, then we have to either do one of two things: provide subsidies or be okay with people being homeless. Mm-hmm. So the most important and impactful policy change is something in the state we're calling Bring It Home Minnesota, and it proposes a major rent subsidy program for the state to supplement the Section 8 subsidies from the federal government, which they need to increase as well. So that would make by far the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful. Carol wants to know, given your 33 years experience at Aeon, what are your thoughts about rent control? And that's certainly a timely issue, given that we're in the midst of early voting in Minneapolis, and that's one of the measures on the ballot.
Yeah, well, rent control is a big subject. And so I get to ask the question a lot, as if just saying you're supportive of or not supportive of rent control means anything. It doesn't. It depends on how it's written. I'll just say it this way. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Reasonable rent control policy would try to prevent dramatic increases in rent that evict people across the board, economically evict people across the board. Modest limitations on that should not, it would only affect one thing, and that is slightly affect the value of a property. Mm-hmm. Too tight of rent control would be idiotic, because it would prevent people from being able to keep up their buildings or improve their buildings. That doesn't make sense either. So some kind of in-between policy makes sense to me. But of course, again, the devil's in the details. What exactly is being proposed is always the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a complicated question to try to answer, and it's going to be a complicated policy to draft so that there aren't a lot of unintended consequences as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so yeah, completely agree. Let's see, here's a question. What do you wish all policymakers understood about affordable housing? How can we as Aeon supporters help promote that?
I wish they would make the connection between what we pay people when they're working and the inability with some of that income to pay for housing in the marketplace. There seems to be a disconnect. Either that or they just don't care about people. We're not really forcing our policymakers to face the reality. They can't have it both ways. We can't say, I want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and then tether them to the ground with a cable, which is what's being done by underpaying people in our economy. And so I think reminding policymakers of that and forcing them to say, so how does this work? Explain to me how it works when you're okay with a $12 an hour wage, but you don't want to do anything about affordable housing. You're okay with homelessness then? I think that's what they're saying.
Jackie has a question. This is interesting. What's a mistake you've made that you would totally make again? Okay. I said, I'm thinking that what she might be saying is there something that was that you thought was a mistake that turned out to be not a mistake?
Well, I'll just say it this way. You can't be afraid to make mistakes. You will not get much done if you're afraid to make mistakes. And that's especially true in the real estate world. We're in the real estate business. We have to act, we have to make decisions. If we wait till everything is perfectly safe, we won't do much. And so I don't even think, to be honest, I don't think in terms of mistakes too much. I think leadership itself is doing what you think is right, and it's not always going to be right. But at the moment, you do what you think is right. And each of us has the ability every day to do what we think is right in that moment. And learn from it if something didn't turn out the way we wished it would. So I think that's what I would say about the topic of mistakes in general.
So given this long arc of leading Aeon, what do you know now that you didn't know then when you started? And that's a pretty broad question, but yeah. Or what do you wish you knew then that you know now? Maybe that's a better way to put it.
I wish I knew that if we pushed hard, more people would come along. I think you're a little tentative at first. I think when you're younger, you think, oh my God, that seems like a big idea or a big change. And, I don't know if we can do that. And I think I've learned that, actually big change and big ideas is what gets people's attention. It's what makes people excited about partnering with you, doing work with you, standing side by side with you, because they can see the potential big impact of that big thing. And so, our ability to do East Village, for example, when the market people said it couldn't be done, our ability to do the greenest, most sustainable, energy efficient, materials healthy project in the United States of America with the Rose, people said can't be done. I think somewhere along the line, I learned that if you pushed, people were excited about partnering with you to get really good, impactful things done. And I think if I'd learned that earlier, we could have done a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The for individuals who are concerned about homelessness, let's say young people, what do you think is the best way or a great way for them to get engaged in making a difference in the community?
The best way. Well,
I do think,
I think talking to your policymakers, talk to each other, making sure it's a topic at your church, make sure people understand, learn yourself about what the real realities are about housing, affordable housing and homelessness. It shouldn't be hard for us to figure out that home is pretty high on the needs scale for human beings. It's right under air, water, and food. And so I think just making sure it's a daily topic, a regular topic of conversation in your regular life. And when you talk to your policymakers and people running for public office, find out if they're going to list it, as high on their agenda.
There's Janet asked a question about where the model for Aeon came from, and I think I'll just expand on that and say, how has the model changed over the last several decades, if at all?
Yeah, I think earlier on, way back in the early days of nonprofits doing affordable housing, I think we were thought of as nice little, almost like your grandmother's bake sale, church bake sale organization. Trying to do good work. And I think really we've been professionalized. In other words, we have really added a lot of talented people who understand this business, understand real estate, and understand operating property. And it's way more professional today, not just at Aeon, but across the board with our peers locally and our peers nationally. We're part of, we're one of the top 80 nonprofit organizations across the country that do affordable housing. And we have housing numbers of units that range from 6,000 to 25,000. We're kind of in between. Some are smaller than us, some are a couple few are bigger than us, but it's really been a professionalized arena, and we can compete with anybody, including the for-profit world, for doing good work and good affordable housing. And so I think that's the change, biggest change.
I think you just touched on something that is really, the organization has become more professional, that it is also a business, that you are running, a big, complicated business. And I think that not people who aren't engaged with the organization don't really understand that all the time, that there's a revenue and expense side, and that you actually have to make those things work together.
Yeah, you do. Oh, you do. We just had that discussion this morning too at the leadership team level. Yeah, I often, sometimes even a staff member comes to me and says, our vision is that every person has a home, and yet we evict people. How do you reconcile that, Alan? And sometimes it is a little hard, because sometimes people are evicted for something that's not really their fault. They get laid off and they can't make rent payments. But in the end, our vision is that every person has a home, but we also understand that it's not totally possible for us alone to make that the case. And if somebody behaviorally is causing problems for everybody else in the property, then how can everybody else make it home if they're being harassed or put in danger by the other person? So yes, we desire that everyone has a home. We have a responsibility not to just that one resident, but to all other 99 residents in that property, to help make home possible for them. That's the other part that's interesting about our work, is that we can't actually make home we can't make home happen. We can only make it possible. It's our residents that have to make it happen. And so this is a partnership with our residents. So I think the answer is that that we have to balance the budget. We have to have money coming in, or nobody will lend us money. We have to be able to pay the bills. And you're right, we have to have a big heart and a brain that understands math. So, and those have to work together.
Absolutely. Well put. The, when you think about the various levels of government, local, county, state, federal, if you could just write the script, what would be the best thing that they could do to help you, Aeon, fulfill its mission?
I think doubling the Section 8 program at the federal level by re-establishing funding significantly for the Section 202 program and a slightly revised Section 236 program, both of which provide both capital as well as rent subsidies for residents, would be the number one thing that the federal government could do to increase affordable housing. It would help both make it more affordable for people who really need it the most, people who are suffering the most, people who are homeless, many of them at least, and it would also help production on the production side. Local, county, and state, I think they need to just find ways to save as much NOAA housing, natural occurring affordable housing, as possible. None of them have really gone all in to do that, and yet it's half the cost. Saving an affordable housing unit is half the cost of creating new. And so it's beyond my understanding why we haven't done more to save what's there, as not just try to build new every time. So those are the two.
Okay, excellent. I know you've worked on a strategic plan here, and I'm wondering, in light of that, and within that plan, maybe, what do you think the biggest challenge is going to be going forward? Let's say the next 5 years for Aeon.
My friend Steve Wellington once told me, he said, what's your biggest problem, Alan? I said, capital. We just need more capital, Steve. If we had more capital, we could do more. He said, no, it's not. He said, your biggest problem is people. Getting enough of the right people to do the work. And I think both of those things are really important for us. And both of those things are going to be key parts of our strategic planning moving forward. How do we get and keep the best people committed to our work and give them the tools and the opportunities to grow. And then we need about, $500 million worth of capital over the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So those are two things that would help us do what we should be doing in the community.
Alan, we know you as someone who jumps into challenges with both feet. And I'm wondering, as you look back over your decades with Aeon, are there any things that stand out as sort of, you're still kind of bothered by the fact that you couldn't get it done? Are there one or two things like that that kind of stand out? You're still sort of sore about it.
Well, there's been a few properties that we would love to buy because we thought we would be really good owners for them and make them better for the residents who live there. There've been a few of those. I won't name them because other organizations, for profit mostly, but a couple of cases nonprofits own them now. But yeah, a few things like that. I just wish I had been smarter, younger. But don't we all wish that? I mean, I don't beat up myself for that. We all wish that, and it's part of the process of growing. And no, I don't have any real regrets, big regrets.
Good. Regrets aren't really very helpful. So I'm with you on that. John wants to know if you've ever considered running for office.
I consider it continually, John. I'm told that continually. People think that if you talk reasonably well, you can put one sentence after another that you might be a good candidate for public office. People don't believe this, but I'm an introvert. And if you gave me the job, I would give it a good shot. But running for it, that seems excruciating to me. Tom, I know you've run for public office. Isn't it excruciating?
Yes, it's and unforgettable.
But you
learn.
Have I considered it? Yes, I considered it. When some crazy thing is happening, I often say, damn it, I'm going to run for public office. But in the end, I think I probably won't. Plus, unfortunately, in the state of Minnesota, the legislative session, for example, conflicts with gardening, the height of the gardening season, which I love to garden, and the height of the baseball coaching season, which I love to do. So, no, I think it's unlikely I'll do it, although I'll continue to probably think about it from time to time.
Is there any advice that you'd give to the next leader? If, let's just say, you're asked.
I do get asked, actually. I've been around a long time. I get asked by new CEOs of organizations like ours, both locally and around the country. And the advice I always give them is don't get fired. If you get fired, you can't get anything done. And so don't get fired.
That's a good lesson.
That's my best advice.
What, again, as you're, looking ahead to your departure, what would you like to say to the staff of Aeon, and what would you like to say to the residents of your developments?
Yeah, to staff, for certain, I will say I'm so proud of you and so proud to have been able to work with you. It's, ties to what I said earlier about the thing I'll miss the most. And staff from top to bottom, just not our leadership team, but I watch our team members do incredible things every day. And I could tell stories. I'm not sure we have time for some of those stories about what some of our team members do to help the lives of our residents. And I'm just so proud to be a part of that. So that's what I would say to them. And then what was the second part of the question, Tom?
I don't remember.
For our residents, yeah.
Oh, yeah, for residents, yeah.
Well, there are a handful of residents. Some who came to my little party the other night, which I was really happy to see them there. When I first came here, we had 110 residents in 1988. I knew personally about 75. Now, 33 years later, I still know 75 of them, or maybe 100 now. And others I don't really know. They don't know me necessarily, and I will try to reach out to as many of those I do know as I can, and just say what a joy it's been to be able to work with you to make home happen for you and your neighbors, because these are good folks who are working some of those minimum wage jobs, or maybe are on fixed incomes of some kind, who are trying to live good lives, and it's been fun to work with them.
Aeon is an important part of the overall affordable housing delivery ecosystem. And I'm wondering, as you think about Aeon, how do you see it fitting within that ecosystem? What role does it play? Is there anything unique about it that differentiates it? How do you collaborate with some of those other organizations?
Yeah, it's probably not generally known that we do some really strong collaboration with both our local peers here. Some people say, why don't you all merge together? We would actually do less if we merged together than we do separately. But we do work together in many different ways, locally and nationally. It's not generally known that we're part owners of our own insurance company, a national insurance company that insures most of our properties. And we established that about 15 or 17 years ago. And it's still running today. So that was a collaboration that we did with peers from around the country. And so those kinds of collaborations will continue. I was just on the phone. I'm on a national board with some of these organizations, and we just had a meeting yesterday about different ways we can collaborate. And so we provided leadership at Aeon. We provided leadership with and for and some of these organizations nationally and locally. Both I and some of our other leadership team members, and even others in the organization, have served on boards of directors and committees and other teams to get stuff done nationally, whether it be around policy changes or functional things like the insurance company. We'll continue to do that, and look forward to it. So,
for individuals who have experienced homelessness and are moving into a sheltered situation, where they're getting a home, what particular challenges have you seen, and how do you address those?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that question.
And that was my question, by the way. But
ask it again, will you, Tom?
Yeah, well, for when individuals are moving into a situation where they're housed and they have been experiencing homelessness, are there any particular challenges that you see arising with those individuals, and how do you address them?
Yeah, it depends on a couple things. First of all, it depends on how long they've been homeless. Sometimes there's a certain socialization you need to survive on the street, a certain way of acting to survive on the street that doesn't work very well in polite company, let's say. It doesn't work very well when you're living next to each other as a neighbor. And so for some of our folks, they do need some help on whether it be how to take care of a unit, how to take care of your unit, how to deal with conflict with others in a functional way, in a productive way. So yeah, those kinds of services and support. We do have staff, and in some of our homeless properties, we have relationship with social service providers who help our residents with those kinds of things. The number one problem, though, about homelessness is really money. is having the money to be able to pay your rent, to buy food, adequate food, and to have health care. I often get told that homelessness is caused by mental health issues and chemical dependency issues. Well, those are certainly contributing factors to negative outcomes for all of us. But I say it can't be the cause of homelessness, because we have, something like 20% of our lawyers and doctors have mental health problems or chemical dependency problems, and they're not homeless. It's about, do they have the wherewithal to be able to pay for a place to call home, to buy food, and to have health care, to get help they need in any other areas. And so the fundamental challenge is making sure that people can be stable in their housing, economically, and in the social ways that was talked about as well.
It's not a secret that we've experienced a higher level of violent crime, in kind of nationally. And how are you all dealing with that? How do you see it? How is it showing up for Aeon residents?
Well, here's the interesting thing. For most of our properties, it has not been a significant problem. It certainly has grown everywhere. It's an issue everywhere that it's increased, that uncivility and, in some cases, lawlessness has grown. But in two areas in particular, two geographic areas in particular, it's been a significant problem. And in those cases, we're trying to provide additional security for our residents by hiring that security, but also, and most importantly, ultimately, work with the community at large, other property owners, our residents, trying to get the government agencies, police department, communities, the cities, engaged with us towards solving the problem. I do say this about that whole issue, and that is, whenever you're trying to make change, significant change, this is true as an individual human being as well, there's going to be a period of pain, period of chaos, period of stress. Frederick Douglass said, if you favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation, you want crops without plowing up the ground. You want rain without thunder and lightning. And the problem we have now is we're in that midst of rain and thunder, lightning, and plowing up the ground. So we're in the midst of that chaos and stress and pain. I'm hopeful our society, trying to make the change that needs to happen, can get through that change, through that chaos as soon as possible, and get to the change, so that our residents, really, who are always hit the most with these kinds of things, don't have to continue to suffer. We are collaborating and doing what we can to keep our residents in the best place as possible.
Most of your work has been done in the Twin Cities metropolitan area, the work of Aeon. And there's a question about what are the issues related to affordable housing in greater Minnesota. Are they different? And I know this might be a question for Warren Hansen, but I'm going to ask you, do you have a line of sight on greater Minnesota and the housing issues there? And if they're different, how are they different? If they're the same, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, without getting too into the weeds, the economics are different, certainly. It costs more to, in good parts of our greater Minnesota, to build a housing unit than it does here in the Twin Cities. And the rents are lower. So it makes the economics of making a deal work a lot harder, actually. But people are people. Those kinds of issues are very similar, whether here they're caused a little bit differently up there than they are here in some cases, but still the basics are the same. It's just that there are differences in the ability to economically make deals work. We have negotiated on a 1,500 unit portfolio across the state of Minnesota, including as far north as Hibbing. It didn't happen, but we would have pulled the trigger on that a few years back. We constantly are looking at properties and potential projects in Rochester and Duluth. We've looked at projects in St. Cloud. It's just that our service area has technically for quite some time been the entire state of Minnesota. So it's just a matter of time before we do something in Rochester or Duluth or maybe St. Cloud or elsewhere. I visited the IRRB not too long ago and talked to them about affordable housing up north. So we've been paying attention to it, and we still see ourselves as a potential tool, and I think it will happen eventually.
So we're getting close to the end of the hour, so I have just a couple of questions. One of which is, what's the best way for people who want to support Aeon's mission to volunteer?
Oh, gee, that's really we have some volunteer opportunities. Tasha Weisenberger Pomeroy is the person to talk to about our volunteer opportunities and our advancement team members. I'm a little divorced from the specifics, but reaching out to Tasha is always the best way to figure that out.
Okay. Let's see. We have one final question here. Let me see if I can find. This is from Matt, I guess. What is the goal line for affordable housing? What are you, what's maybe the vision? How do you know, what are you aiming for? I think, so that you have a goal that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, well, Richard Rummelt, who is the master of strategic planning, says you have to have approximate goal, but that's not the big goal. The big goal is our vision that every person has a home. Of course, that seems too abstract. You can't get staff to focus on that one, so you have to have immediate goals, approximate goals. Our strategic plan is almost certainly going to say that we want to add 10,000 units to our portfolio over the next 10 years. That'd be adding 1,000 units a year, and it would take us from approximately 6,000 affordable apartments we have today to 16,000. Seems like a pie in the sky goal, but our job is to build our organization in a way that can do that, and then it'll be the challenge and the job of all of our partners, our public agencies, our foundation partners, our individual donors, and others to come with us on that journey, so that more of our people, more families and individuals, can have access to home. That is a great way to wrap up our conversation today, Alan. Thank you so much. Thank you for all you've done for our community, and we are indebted to you. So I look forward to seeing you for long leisurely lunches, perhaps. I look forward to it, and I've been a very lucky man, and thank you for hiring me. Okay, my pleasure, my pleasure. Okay, we're going to turn back to Virginia. Thank you all.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Alan. I was paying pretty close attention to the chat during all of that, and I think folks were really enjoying hearing some of your insights, Alan, about your 33 years. I know that I laughed loud enough that my computer was like, "You're muted. Do you mean people to hear you right now?" But it was also making me sad, as I know a lot of people are, about you ending your time at Aeon. But thank you for all of this. And to everyone who could join us today, thank you for coming. We're at the end of this time together. I'm glad we all had the opportunity to hear more from Alan about his time at Aeon. It's been 33 great years. So glad that you were here, and for all of your great questions that spurred on this conversation. Your support of Aeon and affordable homes is critical for our community. And certainly thank you to Tom and Alan for your time and your conversation. That was great. I hope everyone who could join us today will join us for our next event. In early December, we're going to be celebrating the grand opening of a new building, Blooming Meadows North, which is 172 new affordable homes in Bloomington. So keep an eye out for an emailed invitation in November. That will be a virtual opportunity, unfortunately. While it has been fun to see many of you in person over the warmer months, come December will likely be virtual again. And of course, we always need your support. So if you want to make more homes possible, please consider making a gift today. You can do that at aeon.org/donate. That's all we have for you today. Thanks again for joining, everyone. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Alan, and have a great afternoon.
Take care, everybody. Be well.